Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I have another quick video for you guys about more reveals that Games Workshop made today and my thoughts on those reveals. So let's not waste any time and let's just jump right into it. So we're back on the Warhammer community page with this new article called 4 Sizes Fit All. I'll have a link down in the description for those of you who want to read the article yourself. In yesterday's article, we discussed the number of command points that players begin the game with according to the size of the battle being fought. Today we thought we'd take a closer look at those recommended sizes to discuss what impact they will have on the game. Getting the scale right. Arranging to play a game of Warhammer 40k is one thing, but settling on what size of battle to fight is another thing entirely. To help you decide, the new edition comes with 4 recommended sizes of battle: Combat Patrol, Incursion, Strike Force, and Onslaught, designed to help add guidance and structure to your game. From army size, composition, and likely duration of the game, to the escalating size of the battlefield perimeters for larger games, and even terrain density and positioning. Everything is covered to help you get the most accessible and enjoyable experience from each game. So here now they have a couple of pictures going over the Combat Patrol, how many detachments you're allowed to bring, Incursion. So I believe this was the 500 point, 1000 point, 2,000 point, and 3,000 point. And so it looks like, and I've been talking to a lot of people because like I said in my last video, that people weren't sure if we were sticking with 2,000 points or moving up to 3,000 for the tournaments, and it looks like we're going to be sticking with 2,000 points. Frontline Gaming has even come out and said that they're going to be doing 2,000 points for their tournaments, and they're going to be following everything that Games Workshop has said in this post. In the ITC community, usually follows suit with what Frontline Gaming is doing because we all kind of look to them for guidance on what direction the competitive community should take. So in a way, nothing has really changed because we were already doing 2,000 point armies with 3 detachments in competitive play, so that's still fine. The only difference now is we're probably going to be playing with like 1, 2, or 3 less units in our 2,000 point army because everything went up in points. So we're going to have slightly smaller armies, which again is perfectly fine. Like I've said in the other videos, smaller armies are actually fine by me because it means quicker games, it means easier to play games, it means a smaller barrier for entry for people just getting into the game because they don't have to buy nearly as many units to make a full competitive list. So yeah, I'm all for the games being smaller as long as they're not like drastically smaller, which they aren't. Judging by the points increases that they've showed us to intercessors and cultists, we'll have probably like 1, 2, or 3 less units in our old 2,000 point list, which again I'm perfectly fine with. So battles, battle size. Then it goes with how long they expect each size of game to take. So a Combat Patrol, so 500 points, should take up to an hour. Incursion should take up to 2. Strike Force, which is 2,000 points, is going to take up to 3 hours, which is normal. That's how long most tournaments gave you per round at a tournament, so each game was 3 hours long, so that's still perfectly fine. And 3,000 points, they say up to 4 hours. They've probably done a lot of testing, and maybe, yeah, that's how long it takes. But to be fair, too, the people that are testing the game, so if this is based off of people testing, you got to remember, the people that they got to test the game probably, I assume, already know the game very well. So they're not constantly looking up rules, they're not constantly like debating about rules and yada 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 yada. So these times might increase if it's a new player or 2 new players that are trying to learn the game together, because looking up rules is going to take extra time, debating rules or talking about rules with your opponent is going to take time, and all that kind of stuff. So I assume these are based off of people who know the game playing it, but they could have took that into account and added some extra time. But yeah, that's just what I'm assuming, is I'm assuming this is based off of people that understand the rules and don't need to look up the rules like every 2 seconds. Create the battlefield, and this is the part where people are probably going to go grab their pitchforks. The players can now create the battlefield and set up terrain features. Missions are played on rectangular battlefields. The size of your battlefield depends on the battle size you have selected, as shown in the table below. So for 500 points to 1,000 points, you play on a 44-inch by 30-inch board. For the tournaments, playing on a 44-inch by 60 board, so it's no longer 6x4, it's actually a little bit smaller. And Onslaught is 44 by 90. So alright, before you grab your pitchforks, let's talk about this for a minute. So I was thinking about it and I came up with some pros and cons about switching to a smaller board, and then I asked some patrons and they gave me a couple of other ideas to add to the list. So let's go over the cons first and then we'll go over the pros. So the cons is it outdates current playmats. So like myself, I have about 6 or 7 different mats that are 6x4, and so those are now the wrong size according to what Games Workshop recommends. With that said though, all the playmats that I have are like the mousepad type material, and with that type of material it'll be really easy to use like an X-Acto knife or some box cutters or whatever you want to call them, and your measuring tape that you use to play the game, you can just measure it out and cut down your mat to be the new size of what you play for Strike Force or whatever you're going to be playing. Or another option is just use a Sharpie and just draw along the edges and yeah, just reshape your mat to the right size. Simple fix that doesn't really cost you a lot of money at all. And then of course, this is only the minimum size requirement for your battlefield. So by all means, if you still want to play on 6x4, go right ahead. There's nothing stopping you. Just know that that is going to change the dynamic of the game a little bit if you play on 6x4 versus playing on this new measurement size. I do assume some tournaments are going to be moving to the new size. Like, again, I think I already said it. Frontline Gaming is moving to the new size, so I assume a lot of tournaments are going to adopt this new size and do it as well. But if you're a tournament organizer yourself and you spent a lot of money on mats, by all means, run your tournament on 6x4. I highly doubt anyone's going to care. Another con about the board size change is that it's going to be easier for Horde armies to gain board control, because them conga lining their units are going to be able to take up a much bigger percentage of the board than they would have if they're playing on a 6x4 board. So I do think it's a slight buff to Horde armies. With that said, there could be a rule in the future, this is just speculation though, but there could be a rule in the future where coherency works different, and so it might be like 2 inches from model to model, but there might be another part of coherency that says the furthest distance 2 models in the same unit can be away from each other is 10 inches or something like that. Again, this is just speculation, but it's something that could tone down Horde armies and not allow them to gain such a big board control, because they can conga line like across the entire board and like stop you from moving past them. Another con is that there's going to be less room for terrain. I know some people like playing with a lot of terrain and making very scenic and beautiful boards, and you'll still be able to do that on a smaller board size, but it's going to limit your options a little bit. So I wanted to add that in there as a con. And then the last con that I could think of, and to be honest, is probably not the last con totally, it's just the last one that I could think of, or me and my patrons could come up with that I agreed with, is that we're not used to it. It's going to be different. This is the first, I believe this is the first time in Warhammer history where we're switching normal size games down to a smaller board than 6x4. So yeah, that's all the cons I could think about. So let's move on to the pros. It's going to be a slight buff to melee armies, because they're going to have less area that they have to traverse in order to get into combat. And for a long time, for most of 8th edition, a lot of people were complaining melee armies needed a buff. Well, here's a buff for them. It's an indirect buff. It's not directly buffing the melee. It's just making it easier for those melee armies to actually get into melee. Another pro of them moving to the smaller board size is that it's also a buff to slower armies, which is great. Armies like Death Guard had a hard time gaining board control because they were so slow and had a hard time moving up the board and getting to where they needed to be. Same thing with units that only move like 5 inches and stuff like that. Those units couldn't really get across the battlefield in an entire game unless they were advancing for half the game. So now it's only slightly smaller, but I mean, it still does help. It's going to buff those slower armies a little bit and allow them to move over a higher percentage of the board than they would have on a 6x4 board. Another pro, which some of you may think is a con, but trust me, it's a pro. It's a slight nerf to mobile armies. So stuff like Drukhari, stuff like Eldari, basically any of the Eldari races. It slightly nerfs them because they have less area to run away and kite the opponent. And even as a Drukhari player myself, like, trust me, I love Drukhari. Drukhari is the army that, like, I love very dearly. It's the army that got my YouTube channel started because I went undefeated at an ITC major with it. So trust me, I really love Drukhari. And even I will say that I think Drukhari and mobile armies need to be toned down a bit, because mobility is key in this game. And in every edition before 9th edition, games are won and lost in the movement phase. Whether you want to believe it or not, just trust me, games are won and lost in the movement phase. And so nerfing the mobility on armies like this, I think, is a good thing and a step in the right direction, as long as it's not like too heavy-handed of a nerf, which this isn't. This is just a slightly smaller board, so it's going to be harder for those fast armies to kite the opponent, which, to be honest, I think is a good thing, because now instead of just constantly having them move back, they're going to run out of board quicker, so they're going to have to move in other areas, and it's going to be a little bit more tactical in my opinion. It's also a slight buff to short-range armies and short-range weapons, stuff like Meltas and stuff, because again, going with the same idea of melee, it's a smaller board, and we're also going to be playing with slightly smaller armies, so it's going to be easier to get your units up the board to where they need to be in order to do damage. Another pro of them using smaller tables, it also allows more room for other tables. So tournaments are going to be able to, in theory, fit a few more tables at a tournament so they can have a larger size and more players. Or even for local gaming stores, they'll be able to have more tables in their store for people to play the game and get into the game and stuff like that. So it'll be easier for certain stores to run tournaments if they didn't have that much room. And also, if you have like a small house or your play area is small, like maybe you gotta play inside your garage, like in between your car and your tools and stuff like that, well, now you have a smaller area that you have to fit a board on to be able to play the game. So that helps out people like that don't have much room at home to be able to play a game of 40K. Like they even say somewhere down here that it's easy to fit on most dining room tables. Yeah, most dining room tables should be able to accommodate a Strike Force game, which is really good. It makes it more accessible to people, so that's always good for the game. And then the last pro that I can think of is with smaller boards, it's going to be easier to have board control with a smaller army. So stuff like elite armies are going to actually be able to do a little bit, they're going to have an easier time getting board control now, because the board's smaller, and so therefore their little army takes up a bigger footprint on the board, like a bigger percentage footprint on the board. So yeah, so there's that as well. And I guess that's pretty much it for the board sizes. Personally, I'm okay with it because again, it's going to be easy to just trim down your mats, or like I said, use a Sharpie to just outline the new area, or just play on your 6x4 boards. They're saying these are only the minimum size requirements for your battlefields, so you can play on whatever size you really want. So I could see some tournaments still sticking to 6x4, and if they did, I would still attend them. And if there were other tournaments that made on the new measurements, I would still attend those tournaments as well. You just got to realize that the games are going to be slightly different depending on the board size that you play on. So just get used to both in case tournaments start using both, unless all the tournaments adopt the new size. But we'll have to wait and see about that in the future. So there's 18 different Eternal War missions now, which is nuts. And here's the Combat Patrol missions, which I believe is the 500 point missions. And in this mission, it goes over stuff like the mission rules, sweep and clear. It goes over how you gain points. It goes over that you only control an objective at the end of your command phase. So again, this means your unit will have to move on to the objective and then survive until your next turn in order to hold that objective. This is because the command phase starts your turn. So if your unit's right here, if your unit's right here, you start your turn, so you go command phase. Now you have movement phase. Okay, you move here. Now you got to wait till your next command phase. That's next turn. So because it says at the end of your command phase that you score it, again, you're going to have to survive there for a whole turn. So it causes counterplay because your opponent can send like 10 guardsmen against your 3 custodian guard, and they can just stop you from gaining that because they'll be holding the objective technically, or at the end of your command phase, because yeah, they're going to be there holding it from you. They have more models, they have objective secured. Or they can just shoot you off the objective before you can get that. So this is going to cause some tactical play where you're going to probably have to send multiple units to go stand on an objective in order to hold it. So that way you can outnumber the opponent, or you can just not get shot off the opponent. So overall, I actually really like that change. I like the way that they're making it that you have to hold objectives now. I actually really like that. And then also down here, they just go over that Combat Patrol is a great way to get started with the game, which I agree with. I think that like 500 to 1,000 points is usually where you want to start when you're getting into the game, because then you don't have a million different units to learn the rules for. You can learn the rules for those units before you add more into your army. So yeah, I agree that Combat Patrol is going to be the way to start out if you want to get into Warhammer 40k. Or to be honest, buy one box of stuff and play Kill Team to get used to it, to see if you'll even like the game. If you do, then expand to start doing Combat Patrol games of 40k. But yeah, again, overall, I'm all for all of these changes. I'm for all of the changes that they've announced so far, and I can't wait to hear more about 9th edition. I'm so excited about 9th edition. I honestly can't wait until the rulebook drops, whenever that is. I assume within the next month or two. And yeah, as they release more rules for this stuff, I'm going to release more videos talking about them. Anyways, with all that said, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the new board size and stuff like that. I'm really interested to hear what everyone has to say. Also, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you want to see more content like this, then make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to be notified when I make more videos. And if you find yourself enjoying the channel a lot, I would ask that you consider making a pledge on Patreon. Patreon is the main source of income for the channel, and it's what allows me to make content like this. I do offer different rewards for different patron tiers, stuff like exclusive access to the Almost Pro Gaming Discord server, or personal coaching from me, or there's another tier where I'll build you a custom list if you would like. That tier would be perfect for a new player just getting into the game that that wants a good place to start, so that way you don't go out and buy a bunch of units that you end up discovering aren't that good, or maybe you structured your army list wrong, stuff like that. So yeah, I guess last few things to say is thanks to all my past and current patrons. You guys are awesome and I love you all. Without you guys, the channel would not be where it's at today. And thanks to all of you for watching the video. You guys are awesome and I'm glad you're enjoying the content. So that's going to be it for the video, and I guess I'll see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.